Hi, welcome to Holistic Mojo. I'm Sahara Lee, and today I want to share with you a super easy, super ooey gooey, feel good, amazing self-massage technique that you can use to combat tension headaches, neck, shoulder, and upper back pain. So I'm going to first start off with the actual exercise for all of you instant gratification folks out there. And then if you're into geeking out over anatomy and the who and the why and the how, stick around and I'll share that with you as well. So to get started, you're going to need some therapy balls. I use Yoga Tune-Up therapy balls. I love these. I swear by them, but you can use any brand that you want. You can also use tennis balls, racket balls, or something like that, but you want it to be kind of sticky so that it grabs onto your tissue. And these are really great because they're not soft, so they're really, really firm, which you're not going to find in a racket ball or a tennis ball. So you're going to need 2 of those, and then you're going to need a yoga block. You can also use a stack of books or a low step or mats or whatever you have laying around, but you want it to be firm. And if you're using a yoga block, you want the high yoga block, not the half size one. So this is about 5 inches or about 12 centimeters. So you're going to grab those and then we're going to get started. Okay, so first things first, you're going to need to understand the placement of the therapy balls. So you're going to want to find the base of your skull. So you just feel down the skull until you find that little lip before you get down into the soft tissue. So you find that lip. That's called your occiput. And you're going to take your therapy balls and you're going to place them right in the center, right in alignment on either side of the spine, right at the base of the occiput. Okay, so here's where things get a little bit difficult because every body is different. So you're going to have to find your own sweet spot. You're going to find yourself lying on the floor with your yoga block or whatever you're using as height. You're going to lie on your back and you're going to take those balls into your special little spot, the occiput, and place them on the block right in the center. And this is the part that's tricky because sometimes the balls are going to roll around and you need to find the placement of the balls on the block that is perfect for the shape of your head. So once you find that spot, you're just going to relax and rest. You'll find out immediately that you want to take a deep breath in because it's very calming, it's very relieving. And you're just going to sit here for a second and let the weight of the head press down into the therapy balls. Close your eyes, take a couple deep breaths, and just let your whole body relax. You want to imagine that the occiput, so the base of the skull, is hanging off of the balls as if it was a coat that was hanging off of a coat rack. So really allow yourself to relax and to drape over the therapy balls. And this might be quite intense depending on how tense you are, how tight you are, essentially how screwed up you are. So you might need to hang out here for a long time before you want to start to move. But if you're feeling like you're ready to move, you can just very slowly start to rotate your head to one side. And you're just going to take it all the way over until you hit the edge of the occiput. So it's maybe an inch or so behind the ear. And you'll feel the other ball start to lift away from the skull. And that's when you know you want to stop. So you're just going to roll all the way over to that side and rest for a second. And then roll back center. And then roll over to the other side. Again, just to the edge of the occiput. Hang out there. Come back center. And you'll notice the balls slowly move apart. So you might find that just after 2 turns, you need to move the balls back into center. Might take a couple more. So anywhere between center and the edge of that occiput that you feel a lot of tension, you want to hang out there. So stopping along the journey on any sore spots. Again, you're using the weight of the head and gravity to do this work for you. So you're not forcing anything. You're not pushing your head down into the balls. You're just relaxing and allowing the weight of your head to rest onto the balls. And do this for as long as feels comfortable, as long as it feels good. And then when you're finished with that, you're going to come back center. Again, make sure that the balls are touching each other and on either side of the spine, right at the occiput. And then you're just going to imagine a clock. Now, this is where people always get lost whenever I'm teaching workshops, because I say, or sorry, not a clock, a watch. A watch face. It's pretty small. Even a big watch face is small. But what I tend to find with people when I'm using this cue is that people want to like go Flavor Flav, like with the clock on your chest, like it's this huge clock. It's small, okay? Very small, like a large coin, a watch face. So you might not even notice if somebody's looking at you, they might not notice that you're even moving so much. So you're thinking about that watch face. We've got the 12, the 3, the 6, and the 9. And you want to take your nose and thinking that your nose is right in the very center of the watch face. You're just going to move your nose up to the 12 and then down to the 6. So this movement is like 1 to 2, maybe if it's a big clock or watch, 3 centimeters. It's super small. Very subtle, but you're going to feel it. You might feel this in your eyes because we are in the area where all the ocular nerves are wound up. So that's why we get those tension headaches, and that's why we get blurred vision, tired eyes. It's not just from staring at our phones or our TV screens or our computer screens. It's because this area loves to get all sorts of tight, and it squeezes on those ocular nerves. And if you hang out for the anatomy part after this, you're going to see all the different muscles that come into this one little area that we're working right now. So after you go from 12 to 6 a couple times, you're going to come back center, and then you're going to move 3 to 9. So it's super subtle again, just a couple centimeters or an inch. And this side one will eventually move the therapy balls further and further apart. But it's nowhere near as quick as the last one where we were moving the whole length of the occiput. So if you find that they move out to the side, if you have a lot of hair, they might slide a little faster. Just keep moving them back into the center. Okay, and last but not least, we've got a super eyeball roller here. So using that same watch face, you want to lift up to the 12 and then just roll all the way around the clock. Super small, super specific. Do it a couple times in one direction and then reverse and go in the other direction. So we're starting off very small, very subtle. As you get these muscles to relax, you might notice that you can go in bigger movements, but start with these small movements. And go a couple times in each direction. And then once you're done, you're going to lift the head up, take the balls out from under the head, remove the block, and lie flat down on the floor. And think about drawing your chin down towards your chest and in towards your throat. So if you're trying to flatten the back of the neck. And then externally rotate your arm bones and draw your shoulder blades in towards your spine. And just press everything down into the floor for a couple breaths. See how many chins you can give yourself. And then let that go and just relax. Shake the head side to side a couple times and rest here for a couple breaths. And you don't want to sit yourself straight up to come out of this because that puts a lot of tension back into the neck. So to come out of it, you're just going to roll over onto one side, let your head hang, and lift yourself up to seated. All right, all my little bookworms, let's get geeky. Here we have a side view of the human skull. The green portion that you see in the back is the occipital bone. So you can see that it goes about halfway up the back of the head, and it also goes forwards towards the jaw until just behind your jaw. Here's a bottom view of the same skull. The green part is again the occipital bone, and from this view you can see that there's a hole in the bone. Through this hole inserts the brain stem up into the brain. And since the brain stem and the spinal cord are kind of the home base for your central nervous system, you can imagine how that affects the body if the musculature around this opening is tight or fatigued or out of place in any way. You're not going to be thinking properly, your nervous system is not going to be acting properly, you're not going to be regulating properly. If you take a look at the center top of this photo, you'll see the occipital belly of the occipital frontalis. This is a really cool section of tissue. It goes essentially from the base of the skull, which is also known as your occipital ridge or your occiput, and it goes up and over the skull and comes down to about your eyebrows and eye socket area, so top of the eye socket. And unlike most muscles that have a belly in the center and then tendons and ligaments on either end, this one has a belly in the back, a belly in the front, and then fascia, tendon, ligament in the center. So it's a pretty neat muscle. It essentially wrinkles the forehead and releases the wrinkles in the forehead. So if you just take a second and lift your eyebrows and then put them down, lift your eyebrows and put them down. When you're lifting, that's the frontal aspect of that muscle. And then when you put the eyebrows down, that's the occipital or the back aspect of that muscle. So just see if you can feel the difference between the front of the muscle working and the back of the muscle working. Moving down into the musculature of the neck, shoulders, and upper back. If you look in the bottom left quadrant of this slide, you'll see the descending aspect of the trapezius. This is also called the upper trapezius. And the entirety of the trapezius muscle is actually our most superficial muscle through here. And this muscle, specifically the descending aspect, which its origin is up at the occiput, this muscle is what moves the head into extension, so dropping the head back. It's also what moves the head into flexion, so dropping the chin forward, and also sort of side flexion, so dropping your ear to each shoulder. It also works with shoulder elevation, and its insertion point is actually out on the spine of the scapula. So anytime you're moving the shoulders or moving the scapula at all, this trapezius muscle is being affected, and actually the upper, middle, and lower aspects of the trapezius all end out on the spine of the scapula. But this descending aspect is actually the only one that attaches right up on your occiput. So anytime you're moving your shoulders, anytime you're moving your head in any movement other than rotation, the descending trapezius is working. And if this origin point up here on the occiput is in any way not working properly because it's too tight, or because it's not able to work appropriately because other muscles around it are too tight, then you're going to be having pain, you're going to be having discomfort, you're going to be having lack of range of motion or difficulty moving into full range of motion. If we move under the trapezius and laterally, so away from the trapezius, we come up against the semispinalis capitis and the splenius capitis. So both of these muscles are responsible, again, for extension, dropping the head back, flexion, dropping the head forward, lateral flexion, so dropping the head side to side, and for rotation. However, the semispinalis is the first one we come to and under the trapezius, and it runs vertically along the spine. So its insertion point is along the occipital ridge, and then its origin points are kind of like little fingers that spread out towards the spine, so up along the spinal processes, along the cervical spine in C4 to C7, and then down into the thoracic spine from T1 to T6. So if you drop your head forward into flexion and then take your head backwards into extension a couple times and just feel that muscle going right from the medial point of the occiput out maybe an inch or two, not even, and then going all the way down to essentially your sixth rib. And just feel that movement and notice where you're tight there. And if you're tight up at the occiput, then how that's going to affect the movement of the upper back, of the spine of the upper back, because these attach onto the processes of the spine, of the vertebrae themselves. So if they're really tight, imagine that those little fingers in those origin points are kind of pulling the vertebrae in one direction or the other direction. And that's how you get those misaligned vertebrae along the spine. Moving laterally from there, we have the splenius capitis. So this muscle has an origin point that's a little bit shorter. So it only goes from C7 to T4. And its insertion point is a bit more lateral along the occipital ridge. So it does kind of the last little bit of that occipital bone into the mastoid process, which is a part of the temporal bones of each side of the head. So if you turn your head side to side and think about that kind of bulbous part of the occiput, so if you move your fingers along the occiput laterally, so outwards, you'll find that kind of bulbous feeling bone, and that's the mastoid process. And that's the beginning of the temporal bone. So when we were doing that exercise where I had you rolling the balls all the way over to the side in that more augmented movement, that's what you were coming up against. And that area tends to be really tight because we've got the muscle of rotation coming up into that place, but we've also got the temporal bone and the occipital bone coming together there. So anytime you've got a joint, it's going to be a little more unstable. There's going to be more movement that's happening there. So those areas tend to be a little bit more tender. So if during that exercise of rotating fully side to side, you found that area to be really tender, then you're going to want to focus on working in that area. Up next is one of my absolute favorite muscles to not only work on, but to say, the sternocleidomastoid. And it is also what I call the come to Jesus muscle, because when I'm working on clients, they have a come to Jesus moment. This muscle has a huge use. It moves from the back of the head all the way forward around to the most medial aspect of the sternum. So it has a really kind of wound up movement already, or position in the body. So when it gets tight, it's going to be pulling your sternum, it's going to be pulling your head, it's going to be pulling on your neck. So this muscle is incredibly important to make sure that it is happy and healthy. The sternocleidomastoid doesn't actually insert into the occiput, but it does insert into the mastoid process. So that is that bump that we bumped up against as we were doing that large augmented movement side to side with the balls. So again, that area that people find oftentimes to be very, very tender. Its origin points, and there are two of them, is the mandibrum of the sternum. So if you think about, or actually if you reach up and feel your collarbones, and you'll come to the center medially where there's like a notch where the collarbones just drop off. That area, if you stick your fingers down in that area, that is the mandibrum of the sternum. So that's where one of the attachments is. And then it attaches just on those medial aspects of the clavicles of the collarbones. I put this slide here just to present to you kind of the insane highway of musculature that's going on in the neck and in the upper neck and that is attaching up into the occipital bone. So you can have a better idea of just what a shit show it is, so that if 1 or 2 or 8 of the muscles get upset, what is going to kind of be a domino effect through the whole neck, the way the musculature of the head works around the skull, how that's going to start to pull on the skull and affect your brain function. This is the deepest aspect of the neck, heading up into the skull. Moving into the idea of tension headaches and blurred vision, and that coming from a place of bound up muscles within the neck, shoulders, and upper back. So in this slide, you can see that the visceral cortex is actually within the brain. So the ocular nerves are actually in the brain. So how could it be affecting your eyesight, you might ask, if it's all coming from the brain, and this stuff is, shall we call, superficial from the brain. So it's external, it's on the outside of the skull even. Well, when you've got bound up muscles, you are going to have a lower blood supply. You're also going to have less craniosacral fluid that can move up into the brain. The skull is also not one solid bone. It's a group of 7 different plates that come together to form the skull. So it's constantly moving. And the father of osteopathy, osteopathy could be considered the kind of parent to present-day craniosacral therapy. But the father of osteopathy, Andrew Taylor Still, had this theory that the bone was breathing, or that the skull was breathing, so that it was constantly expanding and contracting. So he had his wife, I'm not sure if it was his wife or his assistant, or maybe it was his assistant that was his wife. But anyways, he had her tie his head together with a strap. So like a strap around the head, tie it really tight to see if the brain or if the skull was moving. So if the skull is expanding and contracting, the brain is also expanding and contracting. And he passed out because the skull needs to expand and contract to have its functionality. And when you stop that expansion and contraction, you can essentially kill yourself. So when we are doing things in life that are maybe not awesome for our body or not what our body was meant for, driving cars, sitting all day, staring at the TV, staring at computers, staring at our phones, tablets, things like that, we create chronic patterns of misuse in the body, and that creates tension. So all these little muscles that we've been talking about and that we're working on in this exercise start to get really tight, and as they contract and as they cut off blood supply and as they cut off craniosacral fluid and as they affect, because one muscle affects all the muscles around it, we create a domino effect. So it's not just the muscles of the occiput, but now it's moving down the back. You saw how those muscles moved down the back, out into the shoulders. They move up into the skull and around the skull as well. When those muscles get tight, those plates cannot move. And as those plates get more and more stuck and more out of place, the brain can no longer inhale and exhale. The skull can no longer inhale and exhale. And we start to lose mental function. We start to lose eyesight function. We start to get headaches, because I don't know if you've ever seen anything collide, but if you have a collision of two objects, or let's use the earth as an example because it's a great example of the plates of the head. If two tectonic plates collide together, it creates an earthquake. It creates mountains. So if that is happening on a very minute scale in your skull, it's going to create a little bit of discomfort. And if the plates of the skull can't move properly, and therefore the brain can't move properly, then it can't function properly. And as you can see from the slide, the ocular nerves move through the entire brain. So if there's tension within the brain tissue, if the brain is shorting out in different areas, it's absolutely going to affect the ocular nerves and your eyesight. I hope this video was helpful for you guys. I hope that you enjoyed geeking out with me on the anatomy aspects, and I know that there are tons of anatomy geeks out there, so feel free to leave notes in the comment section. Feel free to geek out as much as you want. Leave links for other videos for other aspects of this area. I am super passionate about anatomy, and I'm super passionate about people understanding their bodies so that they are able to live a more comfortable, free, happy, and healthy life. Thanks for watching my video. If you enjoyed it, please share it and hit the subscribe button. And if you're liking what I'm putting out into the world, head on over to my website, holisticmojo.com, for a full list of my services. From energy work to herbal medicine to physiotherapy, I have got you covered. And if you haven't already, get onto Amazon and grab yourself a copy of my book, The Conscious Alcoholic, A Holistic Approach to Drinking. It's going to teach you all about herbal medicine, Ayurveda, and how you can help balance your body while you're drinking and make better choices when you're out and about having a good time.